Okay, so
It is
yeah,
a long
wonderful.
story.
Oh, okay. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, so don't know who you are, so if you want to introduce yourself, just let everyone know, and yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, of course. Hi, I go by Conan. Um I started talking to vegans mainly because I'm interested in morality, and vegans are the group most eager to engage in such sort of discussions. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you're are you, oh, and vegans are more what? Sorry.
They,
Yes, sorry, it
they,
just totally it bugged out. I think that was me actually. So, what did you say? Sorry, vegans are what?
Vegans are a group very eager to engage in such sort of discussions. I would,
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, I'm very appreciative of that. I, while I have no problem with vegan practices, I think that their understanding of morality is incorrect, and I believe that I have no moral or any other obligation to follow their lifestyle or by basically abstain from using animals.
Okay, yeah, yeah, fantastic. So what is it? I wonder how we should go about doing this. So, what is it about the vegan position or the animal rights position that you think is incorrect, and how does that not what how is that incompatible with your worldview?
Well, first I want to note that my understanding of morality is purely descriptive. I don't believe that prescriptive morality exists in the world as a considerable force. I think that any prescriptive morality has very little impact on the world. That would be the first part, and second part is that I don't believe that rights, as explained in moral contexts, human rights, natural rights, and so on, exist. I think they are uh, a concept which was used to explain existence of morality unsuccessfully, dating back to like Cicero in ancient Rome through later antiquity over Stoicism and a bit through Middle Ages, but it was mostly spread, defined, and popularized during the Age of Enlightenment. And I believe that it, it persisted because it was very easy to disseminate that philosophy because people are very accepting of the thing that they're owed something by somebody, that they have a right to something. And
Like a self-entitlement sort of
yes,
thing.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that there is no proof and there is no indication that such thing as right, other than of course legal rights, but we are not talking about that, exist.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm dismissive of them.
Okay. So with my view pertaining to rights, I believe that we likely they are these non-tangible it's a non-tangible thing that we kind of assign to groups out of the interest of themselves and sometimes ourselves as well. Though I do believe I agree that people I think there is a lot of self-entitlement in a given individual. Regardless of that, I think that it would lead to better outcomes if we fought against some of those kind of like, I guess you'd say like, perhaps primitive, desires. Because I think a lot of what's, naturally instilled within us, when you look at, it's like a child, like, I want, and, we kind of like, what's seen socially as grow up and then like learn that others also are existing around us and they have their needs as well and their wants, and it would be in our best interest, I believe, to adhere to that regardless of whether or not, because I agree with your descriptive claims to I think so at least, but I'm confused why you don't apply those oughts and what your worldview would then look like. So maybe this would be a good way to go about it. So say if you were Conan, king of the world tomorrow, you got assigned the power to have the world be how you would like it to be. what would it look like? How would you navigate, people's needs and desires and ensure that like people don't murder each other, or maybe you want to see a world where they do? I'm not sure yet.
I, if I would be such a being as you described, I would probably not care if people murder each other. I would be above it. I have a
You
simple.
would, sorry, sorry, I just didn't hear you. So you said you wouldn't care, and then what? Sorry.
Well, you proposed what would I do in the world when I would be
Yeah,
God?
sorry, I didn't hear it all.
I would
Yeah.
probably be above it. I wouldn't really care.
Oh no, Conan. Okay, now I see what. Okay, so this is right. We can go through this, and I'm going to try not to psychoanalyze because, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a very cynical person, Conan. Like, when I think about people, like, I'm not misanthropic. I love them, but like,
I
I
also love
don't.
people. I enjoy them very
Yeah,
much.
but I don't know about you, but I love them, but I sometimes don't like them. Uh, like, you know what I mean? Like, I love them very deeply, but I have very negative views and assumptions about their intentions. And I don't know how much of that is because of my observation, how much of it is because that's just how people are, how much of it is just how because people currently are and they're not necessarily what they could be, and how much of it's just my mental health projecting upon that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but I don't see the point in you expressing those opinions.
Yeah, well, so the point of okay, the point of that is regardless of how I see people and what I, think that they will do and how it will act out, I am concerned with whether or not they're going to kill each other. I am concerned with that. Let's
Well, of
take it
course you
away
are
from
concerned with if
yeah,
they
and
will kill
I
each
think
other.
others
I would say
I think
that,
others should be as well. So we can go through that,
yeah,
like
yeah,
why
I would
yeah.
absolutely agree with that. You have a moral instinct, which is, from what I observed, functions pretty normally, pretty commonly, and it would be very. I would be very surprised if we thought of people murdering each other wouldn't alarm you. But
So do you oh sorry,
I,
carry on.
when in your hypothetical which you proposed, I would use my reason to overpower my instinct. But
So you
that
would
is
you wouldn't do anything about it, you mean? You wouldn't do like you had the power to prescribe oughts onto people, give consequences to ensure that they'd stop, but you because you don't you see the world
let's say
descriptively,
it
you
like
wouldn't do
this.
anything about it?
I would try to fulfill my every wish, but I don't see a point in us describing or discussing something so extraordinary, which is never which will never happen, because I'm
The reason
I
sorry,
no no
sorry to cut in. It's just the reason
I understand
yeah,
what
I
you
was
are
just going to say
trying
the
to.
reason that I am like doing the hypothetical, yeah, it's just to kind of see what the world would look like in your world. Because when I'm talking to people, I'm having these debates with people. What I'm really interested in as well is seeing what world they'd like to see. And because often people would like to see a world very similar to that of a vegan who's actually going out and doing those actions and seeing it lived out.
Well,
So that's why I'm doing it. Yeah.
uh, maybe I have actually given this much thought, even though I'm not usually deal in uh, prescriptive imaginations, because I don't see much point to it. Um I see no reason for me to, in any hypothetical, to be concerned with anything other than consequences of that hypothetical. If you say, Conan, you are a god, I would act like a god, and I would fulfill my every wish. That wish and one can be to save this person, to kill that person or thing, and to destroy the whole universe or to create a new universe. It does not really matter.
So what you
But
mean
what I
is
would
so if
do,
you were yeah,
same as
sorry.
what I would do, same as you would do, same as everybody else would do, I would fulfill my wishes. When you say I want to live in the vegan world or something close to a vegan world,
Mhm.
that would require basically the same thing as me. you fulfilling your wish. Everybody
Yeah, so
wants to
I
fulfill their wishes.
I agree that fundamentally, you could get most actions that we engage in, we desired to do. There was a desire to do that for some purpose. So, when we boil it down to that, however, the motivation, the purpose for doing something, I think that's what's important. So what you're saying is, so you would just kind of like you'd act out your wishes, but you're not really sure what they would look like. It would just kind of be on like what you so desired in that moment. Do you
Yes,
know is
but that has
okay.
no. But to be fair, my wishes have no bearing on my moral stance and my moral view. So
I think mine do. Yeah, mine do.
yeah,
That's the different. Yeah. So yeah, because you're working in descriptives, you've got no or kind of driving. What you should do. You just kind of do it, right? That's kind
well,
of
that is correct. I have no
yeah.
odds in my because my view as morality as the object. I don't. Some will have objection with me using the word objective, but something that is real in the world. My main interest is in describing it correctly because I have a wish to gain knowledge, and I am trying to describe this thing which I believe philosophers throughout the history tried to describe. I am trying to describe it, which I think is the most accurate way. And
Yeah, I'm
I
just.
and in my current understanding of morality, it does not include animals as anything other than property or basically a resource under control. So,
Yeah, so this is interesting though, because so you would this is like a weird stance. So you've kind of come into the world, you've seen it as it is, and you're kind of like you don't really care the outcomes of what follow. We are in a system that does, discriminate against, other types of animals, all in different kinds of ways. So you don't really, seek to change that because there's no ought driving you. But what I'm trying to understand is, so like, if I randomly like just decided to kill someone, do you see that as immoral? Do you see that as amoral? Would
is
it
is
be
that
amoral?
someone a human being?
Yeah, human being. Yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
well, without any other, I would call it yes to be immoral.
Immoral.
To kill a human which did not break morality, who did not act immorally, and the killing would be the punishment for that action. I would call that immoral.
How can you call that immoral though if you have no like there's nothing dry there's no oughts, because surely it can't be immoral.
Well,
Like
just because
maybe I missed something.
well,
And
you are mixing prescriptive and applied morality. I am perfectly capable of answering applied ethical questions with
mhm.
descriptive morality.
Okay, but the thing is, so in a vacuum where that wasn't applied, that wasn't what we saw today. If you were Conan, thousands of years ago, before we had these kind of discussions about whether or not, obviously we were talking about law here, implementing
No,
law,
no, I'm not.
considering
No,
these
I'm
things
not
wrong.
talking about
No,
laws.
no, I said I am.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, that's fine. So before that, you wouldn't have said that is immoral, or would you have thought so? With human and animals specifically.
Well, as I believe that morality is a genetic, moral instinct is a genetic trait, evolutionary trait, I cannot particularly point to a point in time in which it developed, but I believe that it was at least 100,000 years ago and probably more. But of course, there was a point before the moral system was in place, and before the moral system was in place, uh, nobody, be, humans or beings at that time were not bothered with is something is or is not moral because they had first no frame of reference, second no concept of morality as such, and basically morality did not exist. Before morality existed, nothing could be moral or immoral.
Yeah, so I'm trying to work out. So because my philosophy understanding, I would say it's, quite amateur intermediate. So
myself.
I'm trying to understand how we've got there. If we had your kind of position, I know your position's kind of rare, but how would we have got to the point where the morality did exist and we could say, okay, well, humans, it'd be wrong to kill them. Like I'm trying to work out how we would get there if we had this kind of view.
Well, wrong is a word I try to not use because it has both. It's not very a precise word, but let me point it like this: like any other evolutionary trait, moral instinct was a random mutation. These random mutations offered some evolutionary advantage. That evolutionary advantage was that it allowed that individual to better conduct intergroup activities, and that gene spread through, we know which means, and those groups who had that genes outperformed groups which lacked that gene, and the gene became dominant in a population. With every or vast amount of people having moral instinct, there was a simple expectation that the other person will act in accordance with a moral instinct. Because it is a genetical trait, it will be probably similar in most individuals who inherit that trait. So, because we have pre-comprehensive expectation of that other person having a moral instinct and acting basically morally. Of course, when I say morally, I mean bare minimum of morality. Specifically, I believe that moral instinct can be boiled down to basic principle of non-aggression, but not exactly, because people have a lot of problems with principle of non-aggression, which I think some are valid, but something similar to it, not to go very deep into it for the sake of our viewers.
Yeah, okay. So to go to that, because obviously you can make the argument that that morality is coming from somewhere biological, and we do certain things like experience empathy for biological advantages.
Yes, of
But
course, we
can,
feel
to
every
get
feeling
your
for biological advantage.
yeah, but the thing is, so what I'm interested in, even if it is a biological advantage, even like say to love, for example, like I can look at that and go, oh yeah, well that's kind of like my biological drive to love, to be part of someone so that I'm safer in the world, and my existence can be affirmed, and whatnot. But even though that is the case, it's still the case that to love, to have that feeling, is something that we seek, and we find value in, and we see that that's also the case in other animals. So what I'm like trying to understand is, wouldn't you prefer to, or maybe not quite frame it in that way, would you prefer a world where individuals who can have those experiences were actually able to do so?
My preferences are irrelevant.
I just want to know them.
I don't know. I don't have any. If you want to, if your question is, do I want a vegan world? No, I don't, because I get pleasure from basically eating meat and using animals, and I don't want to lose that pleasure
Sorry,
for
just
nothing.
sorry to cut in. I'm not asking if you want a vegan world. So I asked if So we're talking about these feelings like love, and like the positive experiences specifically, even though they are biological drives, arguably. Would you want to see a world where individuals are able to experience that and express that freely? That's just what I'm
Well,
asking, not
they
so much
are
vegan.
able to experience it freely today.
No, they're not. So say for
In which
example,
mean,
like so in various means. So say for example in the dairy industry, where babies are taken away from their mothers, that bonding process is stripped from them, so they are not able to
oh, so you mean,
experience.
yeah, I don't care.
You don't care,
No,
okay. I'm just trying to, because it's very like when we get down to the bottom of this, I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if this is like too much of a psychoanalysis, so forgive me if it is. But I'm wondering why you think that way. Because
Uh,
you grant this is a very like rare kind of way of thinking, right?
yes, yes, I
Yeah.
have been told this many times. This is not the first vegan debate I had.
Well, I guess I mean if you have this worldview, I imagine it leaks into your your real life and into other things as well. Like surely, because obviously that extends past that, and we act out in ways that are driven by what we believe. So I'm imagining not just vegans have told you this, no?
Yes, but again, uh, the way we treat animals for me causes no mental anguish. I get mental anguish when I actively observe something like that, but that chance to observe that is very rare, and I have no reason to seek such observation because they will bring me a mental anguish. Admittedly, I lost less than before I was exposed to a lot of vegan propaganda, which shows the uh, I don't want to say average because it's I don't believe that it is average. Select videos of animal agriculture practices, so I lost the surprise and shock and awe effect. So thank vegans for desensitizing me
Well,
to
the
something
thing
like
is,
that.
so when we use the term propaganda, I don't know if you're meaning to, but like I understand it doesn't, it is the case that propaganda can be very true, but I think people are kind of using that in a charged way. Like, as well as that, like I've been vegan for 7 years. I've seen a lot, and I've witnessed and still do, these things, and I have become somewhat desensitized for my own,
Yes,
mental
that is
well-being.
this is very interesting how that happens,
But
right?
well, yeah, I think it's just a defense mechanism, isn't it? Just because
Yeah.
to be able to, we're not supposed to. I obviously it's hard to interject, but all this kind of like evolutionary stuff. But we are like all these things that we have the access to know everything that's happening in the world right now. That's a lot for a human brain to deal with. We're not built to take in that much negative information. So
Well,
I guess it is just a
not
defense
built to
mechanism. But
take that much information in general, or to process that much information
yeah,
adequately, let's
exactly.
say.
But the thing is, although I have a defense mechanism built up and I've become desensitized, it doesn't stop, my ability to understand what my contribution could or couldn't be, and then what it would do. Like, for example, when I was working in a hospital, I became incredibly desensitized to ill people to death, but I still had to treat those patients with the same care and respect, even if I was closed off in some way. But I want to kind of go through the because you said it would be immoral to kill humans.
Yes,
But and cut me off if I'm like straw manning or something. But I'm trying to just understand. But if you had the power to kind of control how people like navigated through the world and their actions, you said you wouldn't care if people were actually killing other people. Why do you think that, like, and maybe you'll be repeating yourself, it's just forgive me, I am just trying to understand. If you think it's immoral, and you had the all the ability, you had all the resources to like stop it, or you know teach people to not do so, you wouldn't do anything about it. I'm wondering why, if it is immoral.
I well, if it at that time it would be my wish to do something like that, I would, but I don't have any obligations to do so. There can be no obligations from descriptive views of the world.
So
You cannot cross is odd cap.
So
That
you
is
think
impossible.
that if someone wanted to harm you in some way, out of that you didn't want that in any regard, and they were harming you, and they even went to kill you, they'd have no obligation to stop and not do that.
No, they would not have any obligation to stop. If somebody wants to kill me, they will try to kill me. if they don't believe that, if they believe that they will get more benefit from killing me than the possible negative of breaking morality, well, then they would do the act. That is why people do crime, right? Because
Yeah, they
they
do.
believe that it is worth the risk of getting punished.
Well, in some cases, absolutely, but just because they do
In
it,
every case.
it doesn't like. And the thing is, like, so this it kind of sounds like you talk a lot about like evolution and kind of naturalistic behavior and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like in your worldview, it just nature is as nature does, and it just kind of goes along, and we can make statements about whether or not that's right or wrong, but
Well,
we
we
can't
can.
really intervene unless it's our desire at that time to do so.
Well, to be fair, I did not make any sense about right and wrong. I only use immoral, moral, or amoral because right and wrong are very words that are often used without the full understanding of their implications. But
So
you
sorry,
are free to
to
use them, of course.
clarify.
I
Yeah,
will abstain
to
from using them.
okay, to clarify, yeah, in this conversation they are synonymous with immoral, immoral being wrong, moral being right. So
Yes,
just
yes,
yeah. So
I grasped as such.
okay, so yeah, so like understanding my how I'm using those words, do you agree with what I said prior?
Uh, in certain cases, we can assign more or more accurately, probably immoral acts to a person. That would be a correct statement.
Okay, so yeah, so you do think that things can be deemed that, but like we don't, there's no obligation to do anything about that, and yeah, a kind of like
Well,
naturalistic
there is
world.
no obligation. There is certainly incentive to do something about it, but there is no obligation.
Yeah, there's absolutely an incentive, but I'm just trying to like, because when I'm like, this is just to me like I'm just kind of in shock, I've got to say, about like the kind of worldview, like the world that you kind of set out. And obviously I don't know, because obviously if it's built into your view that there's no like oughts, I guess you just kind of discuss this and don't really wish or care if anyone feels the exact same way that you do about this belief system. Like, am I correct?
Well, I only care if somebody thinks that this is inaccurate description of the world.
Yeah, so sorry, can I just because like I'm very slow, I'm sure you've noticed, I'm just like I'm asking, so like if you don't care to let or incentivize other people to kind of think this way and act out this way.
Well, I would certainly incent. Well, if I am very willing to spread my understanding of morality, if that is what you are asking, I believe that people are and do think this way, even though maybe not in these words.
I do think some people think this way in some sense, but I think that that kind of obligation pushes against it. I do think that because, like, how they say you're not your first thought, sort of thing. I think sometimes the first thought is this, but the second thought that follows, that is us, that is a product of our environment, that is the teachings built into us. I think then that is more my view that comes in.
Oh yeah, certainly.
um
You
yeah.
can you can uh, um, uh, teach a person to have various patterns of behavior and thought, but you can argue that it would be no different than what the Nazis did with what I call brainwashing people. That is something that is done, but that is why I often distinguish between morality and ethics. Ethics is what society enforces, and morality is our natural evolutionary prepositioning to, let's say, social interactions. Specifically, I would say that morality is interhuman uh, system of behavior based and reliant upon moral instinct.
I
But
don't think. Yes. So, what was it that you said? I don't think it's the best idea to kind of like analogize it to like what Nazis did, because when they were doing what they were doing, the motivation behind it was to attempt to justify exploitation,
yeah, but
harm and
motivation is by the end irrelevant. They were trying to push their own agenda, same as any other group
absolutely.
of
But
people.
I think motivation is
It
relevant
is
because
simply
sometimes
effective.
when
Sorry,
sorry, Conan. I think it is important because I think there are reasons why specifically were the Nazis brought up then. Like literally anyway, you could say schools, you could say like anything. Like there is, when we are constructing our language and talking, there are motivations behind that, and I do think they're important. Like my motivations right now, like as you've probably seen, I want to open and expose someone's worldview and see where that one leads to demonstrate that mine's better. That's my motivation. And I think that's quite important upon understanding, coming to speak to me like that. I think the motivations are very important.
Well, in case of schools, in case of Nazis, which I pick because they are the most extreme and the most interesting example, to be fair, they always say that every discussion of morality always touches with Hitler. But at the end of the day, their motivation are the same. They want to influence people into their viewpoint.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Yeah,
there is no difference between them.
the thing is though, the outcomes are very different, and that's what's important.
Outcomes
I know
could be
it
very
might not be
different, but
very different, yeah.
but the methods and the motivation is the same.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. But we could boil everything down. Like we could, you could make anything, like say, like a serial killer, for example. You could say, that their motivation was for affirmation and desire or a sexual desire, but the
Yeah,
outcome
it
of
is very
those is very
possible.
different. And I
That
am
is why
focused on that.
that is why motivation is not a factor in judging if act is or is not immoral.
No, it is also no, so it's not. Well, I think there could be some examples where it is, because like if so say for example someone gives you some money, and you might think, oh, that's lovely, they've given me some money, they've helped me out, but their motivation was to use that against you later and be like, oh, I gave you this money, so you've got to do this for me.
Why?
Like that is then where we're coming into a territory. I don't know, how far we go to say that's
why
immoral,
would I
but
have to do something for you if you gave me a gift? Gift don't have any.
I know, I would agree. Like I'd be like, bloody hell, like you gave me money out of the kindness, but that's what I'm just trying to demonstrate, that motivations can be important in understanding whether or not something was right or wrong to do, even if the outcome is you still got money. I think that people are, and I am, interested in those motivations, when navigating, the people I associate with, and whether or not those actions are good. There's a lot of things that someone could do that have good outcomes, but have very bad motivations, like Nazis, for example.
Well,
Like that may, be a
wait.
good outcome of like.
How do you mean?
So like,
Uh, they can have bad motivation, but good outcome. If they have bad motivation, but
sorry,
good
the other way
outcome,
around. Sorry. So like, yeah. So what I meant to say, what I meant to say is, in their view, like they had good motivations. They wanted to spread a view, and they wanted
no,
to
they
do
wanted
what
to
they
do what
thought
everybody
was.
else want. They wanted
Yeah,
to
but
see their wishes fulfilled. I
yeah,
wouldn't
no,
call that
well,
good or bad. That
well,
is just what they wanted to do.
no. So what I'm saying is, so a lot of the time people do things, and if you refer to the literature of some of those accounts, they believe they were doing something that they thought was right because they saw a common enemy in individuals they were exploiting. So
Yes,
you can make that
everybody
argument,
thinks
oh,
that
that
their
their
wishes are good.
motivations were good because they were doing what they thought was right, but it wasn't good at all. Like, those outcomes were horrendous.
Again, I would
But
not classify that as motivations are good, or necessarily even. I would be reluctant to give them any prefix to their motivations just being motivations. If they were good or bad, is irrelevant, because you can say it was a good motivation because it motivated them to do something. It could say it could be a bad motivation because the outcome is bad. That is why I don't use bad or good, because bad or good can be interpreted in many different ways. That is why I abstain from using words like bad and good.
Yeah, but
So
the thing is though, so like, sorry, I'm distracted. I'll debate you, Patty. You were just being really rude one time, so but I'm in a better mood now, so we can debate at some point if you're gonna not be weird like you were last time. But yeah, so you're not changed in any way by that example that I was talking about, where someone's motivation for giving someone money, instead of just, it being like, oh,
I,
I just want to give them money, like it was like, oh well, I'm going to use this against them later. Like I'm gonna.
I cannot understand how that can be used later. And to be frank, I don't think it is a good example of whatever you are trying to point
Well,
out.
so
I
it's
don't
probably
see
because
the
you said,
analogy.
yeah, it's probably because you haven't, like, you don't know of it or you haven't experienced it. But there are it's commonly like understood that people will use tools to manipulate people with, and money is one of those. Like, and if they have the motivation to use it as a power play to manipulate, or to have something that they can hold over someone, that motivation for me is a bad thing.
Uh, if it's a bad thing for you, then you should probably stay clear of it.
Okay. It's just very confusing to know how, like, because it, like, I don't know why you even really have these discussions in the first place about, like, because we are talking about oughts here, even, and you're like, well, I don't use these words. Well, I don't. Well, you're talking to someone I'm fully talking about oughts, and I'm fully talking about, right or wrong, or morality and
Yeah, well,
immorality.
I do it
So
mostly
it's
because
very
I'm looking for the critique of my position.
okay.
To make
Yeah.
it better and to make my description of the ethics, of the morality, more accurate. As I said, vegans are the group which is very eager uh, to engage in this discussion, especially because my view entails that anything you do to an animal is amoral. So that would have huge implication on the vegan movement. If my
So just yeah, just to
if
be sure, like, so if I had a dog in front of me right now and you were watching the screen, and like obviously regardless of how you're going to feel about it, like we'll talk about whether or not, um, if I started like, like kicking them, I ripped the tail off, I did anything to them whatsoever, in your worldview, there's nothing really that compels you to say, yeah, that worldview, that shouldn't happen. Like we shouldn't, like, there should be consequences for that, because in my worldview there should be consequences for that. We should be, teaching people to actually respect animals to the point where that's less likely to happen.
yes,
But in
again,
in
you want to
your
fulfill your
worldview.
wishes. I would say that that would cause undesirable feelings inside me, but I could not call that person immoral because I believe that that would be an incorrect statement.
Can you repeat? Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat, so I'm gonna just get rid of it for
Uh,
now. Like, got people shit talking. Well, I should just know to like get rid of it. Hang on. Easily distracted over here. How can I get rid of it? Sorry, this is my bad.
okay, so if I see you abusing a dog, that would cause undesirable emotions in me. That would cause me a bit of mental anguish, or a lot. I don't know how. Depends on what you would be doing. But I could not call you immoral person for doing so.
I'm
Of course, if that is your dog, if that is somebody else's dog, then you can say that you are damaging somebody else's property. But if that is your
sorry.
dog, I
We're
would.
inserting a lot into it that I've not asked about. So I'll just be clear. Okay, so they're not assigned guardianship by anybody specifically. They might even be mine. And you said something about, oh, what did you just say? Like, because oh man. Can you repeat that bit just before you said that?
Okay, so if we disregard dogs as property, uh, I wouldn't call that a moral act,
Oh,
but
I've remembered you were saying I wouldn't call that person immoral. I'm not looking to talk about whether that person's immoral, because I think
or
a
that
bad action
act.
and a bad person are very like different kind of discussions. But so in your worldview though, there wouldn't be any kind of obligation except, every so often the personal desire to see that change. There wouldn't be any enforcement or social change that ensures that that is minimized as much as possible.
I don't see a point of it. Or
You
point
don't
of
see a
there is that
oh
would be
Conan, what the
that would be
fuck?
limiting the person's freedom for no gains. To I would be
No
my
gains, Conan.
freedom, and I value freedom highly because it gives me a lot of benefits, pleasure, for no gain, and I cannot see the point in doing that.
So there is a game. Like an animal isn't abused and like exploited, and they don't have their life taken away from them. They're not mutilated. That like in my worldview, that's a gain, because I'm not just interested in like I'm interested in freedom, but if it starts like inflicting upon another individual's freedom insofar as their autonomy is violated, or their life is stripped from them, then I'm concerned. Then that becomes the problem. So like in your world, you're concerned with freedom, but that also entails that if someone wishes to kill you, that's their freedom to do so. It's weird because we're talking about like being like naturalistic and stuff, and obviously,
Yeah,
well, not obviously, as far as we're aware, the drive of an individual organism is to survive and reproduce. So I'd think that we'd want to one make a world where we can survive, where that
and
others don't
we
have the
did
freedom
that.
to just
We do that
destroy.
to the most possible point, right?
But in your world we don't.
No, we do. My
No.
world is this world. I'm trying to describe this world. I have
Well,
no other worlds to describe.
but the thing is, though, when we're talking about, it's all well and good talking about what we personally think, but when we spread ideas where we're aiding how other people think, and other people, they are part of societies, and they vote, they spread ideas and oughts. So when we're talking about, you know, this, I am concerned also, and it is important to highlight what your world would look like if other people thought like this. And in this world, if other people did think like this, and they did, and I hope I've outlined why it's important to also go over this, that survival wouldn't, like, that would not be respected. It would in fact be the freedom, and it would be the desires, even if
No,
that desire is to.
the human uh, safety would be maximized, same as it is
It,
now. But of course, other
but
animals
it,
would be
it
less safe, but humans would be equally safe
How do
because
you explain that when you literally said to me, if somebody like were to kill you, then that wouldn't matter. They can do that. There'd be no like
I mean,
consequence.
when I say they can do it, I mean they physically can.
Well, I no, so yeah, I know, Conan, that they physically can. I
Yeah,
see
so why
crime
don't
documentaries.
they?
I know exactly what people can do, but this is why it's important to talk about what we ought to do, because if we just see and observe what people are doing, we're seeing a world where people are having their lives taken away from them.
Yes,
Survival isn't as good as it
and
could
what are we
be.
doing about when somebody takes somebody else's life? We seek to
So the
punish them. That is also a part of
yeah,
morality, of course, because morality only exists as long as it is enforced
well,
as a
I
system,
don't
right?
know, but like what I'm trying to say though is in your if your world was acted out, if people thought the way you do as well, and this is why I think it's important to think in ways that, okay, well, what would the world look like if everyone engaged in this behavior, or the majority?
It would
In
look
the, in the
exactly like it is
It
today.
wouldn't though, because there are so many people who do decide to get. So, do you believe that the only people who murder humans are the people who desire to do so?
Well,
Like,
apart
do you
from
do you think everyone who
accidents,
desires to?
everybody,
Sorry, no, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Do you believe everyone who desires to kill a human right now is has done so or will do so? Or do you believe that there are some people who do desire to kill people but won't do so due to, those oughts, those repercussions of
No,
doing
no.
so?
In my system, there are repercussions, right? There
But
is
that
a
that
punishment for being immoral. But I don't say that you have obligation to punish somebody, but you have a very strong incentive to
but
punish
in your
somebody.
worldview, that would only be you'd only punish if that was the specific desire at the moment. Like it could be the case that the person thought, oh yeah, well that person deserved to die, and I took enjoyment out of them dying, so therefore you shouldn't be punished.
Mm.
We don't have should and shouldn't here.
Of
So
course, you can.
I,
You can. So for that case, you cannot say you shouldn't be punished, right? You will be probably punished.
but in my worldview, they will like. I mean,
You
the
think a
the
lot about
justice system.
shoulds for somebody
But yeah,
who.
I very much do, because the world that I see isn't the world that I think would be better. So there's a lot of shoulds. There's a lot of things that don't happen. So of
Well,
course,
what you are saying nowadays, that world that you see now doesn't correspond very favorably with your wishes. I understand that
no,
you want to change the world according to your wishes, but sorry to
yes, but
say,
the thing
your
is that
power on the world is very small, and it
yeah,
is
but
irrelevant.
it doesn't matter whether my power is small or not. I am still going to spread those ideas.
Of
And the
course,
thing
you
is
can.
as
Well,
well,
you can
but
try to.
we're kind of going back and forth, and things aren't actually, being addressed. I'm in your worldview, you said, yeah, well, most of the time they will be punished, but there will be times where they're not. And what I want to outline is I have my issues with the justice system, but just for the sake of this argument, they would always be punished. There would always be a negative consequence for them doing so. And that would be very clear that if that an individual wanted to pursue that action, there would be that consequence there to deter them from doing so. So in your worldview, you're saying, oh, well, survival, is maximized. I think it's not. I think in my world where, in accordance to what I would wish, enacted, survival would be maximized because,
But yes, but you are demanding perfection, and
I'm not.
perfection
No, no,
cannot
no,
be
no.
achieved.
That's a.
Well,
Where have I
you
demanded?
just said that in your
Conan, no,
view, in your worldview, everybody who harms humans, let's say, just not to keep it without to keep it of both of our morality, that wouldn't if anybody who intentionally kills innocent people gets punished, that would mean that you require perfection of the system, and you cannot require perfection. That would be some
what?
sort.
Hang on. I'm not requiring perfection.
So
I'm
what?
requiring that there are consequences for the action that they take. That's not perfection. That's just a system functioning, being utilized. That's what it is. And I don't
Yeah, but you
understand how
you
that's even a
demand in
criticism.
every case. So you believe
Yeah,
that
in every
no
case
no
bar where
murder
someone
no
in every
murder
case
should go
hang on,
unpunished.
in every case bar, like when an individual lacks moral agency, there should be
No, no,
different
no, no.
consequences for that
Okay, so
individual.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, let's just
Conan, sorry, Conan,
sorry.
please, just for a second. I think you're really nitpicking, and I'm sorry to like this not striving for perfection. I am saying that in my worldview, the survival would be maximized versus yours. So the claim that you stated, oh, well, survival would be maximized in this kind of
How?
world that I'm living in. Because, so say, for example, have you looked up like a broken window theory?
No,
Okay,
I
so
never heard of that before.
oh, okay. So it's this kind of concept that people will adhere to their environment if their environment is like badly looked after, neglected. The people are, then
Oh
so
yeah,
too, like they,
that rings
yeah,
a bell now.
yeah, okay. So like where was I going with that? So yeah, essentially, if something's not tended to, if expectations are lower, if individuals are, not you catered to, then they will, act out accordingly. So that's kind of the first thing I want to go through, that my system, there would be a lot of different things implemented that would ensure that we could like maximize that, but at the same
Like
time,
what?
if there's hmm?
Like a lot will be implemented like what?
I'll
What will
go
be
through that in a
implemented
second.
that is not implemented now?
Conan,
Of
yeah.
course,
So
sorry.
I'll go through that. Like, but that's like so long. I will go through it. But to actually, address what you're saying, and this is why, because I like can't concentrate for like 5 seconds. So what was the like the first question that you just asked me? I'm so sorry. Like I'm not gonna lie, this worldview has like thrown me off because it's really concerning to me. So like I'm just like I'm lost. So so the in regards to the fact that it would be like maximized, I'm saying survival, because when individuals are deterred, when there's a consequence for an action, as you were talking about, you say, oh, well, people will murder others if they think that the consequence outweighs doing that action. Well, in your worldview, it isn't the case that the consequence would necessarily be present, but in my world it would be present. There wouldn't be a way of getting out of that. So that would deter people from actually taking that action if they knew that that consequence would be enforced.
But
But
how would you, uh, that is why I said that you are asking for perfection. How would you ensure that that happens? Because if you can think about it, I don't see why that could not be implemented in my system if it is something that can function in the real world.
but it can function, and we see it function relatively well in the justice system. I would make some tweaks personally, like from my layman understanding of it. Whether or not they would have those outcomes, I'm unsure, but I think that there could be ways to enforce it more frequently. Regarding like the jury system and stuff like that, tweaking that. But in regards to your view, like you're saying, well, how would you know? Well, what I'm saying is, well, you'd know because your system lays out that you're not always going to have those consequences. Like, because what
Because
if
you
someone
won't.
doesn't desire at that time to punish someone? Because what if,
No,
say, for example, they were your mate, they were your friend, and you don't desire to see them be like, so right, this is a good example. Okay, so in like the UK, for example, this is probably elsewhere. Say you got two mates, one kills a person, the other one covers it up. They may desire not to tell anyone because they're like their best mate. Like, they don't want to see them go down. It may be their desire not to say, but there's a consequence called perverting the course of justice if you don't dob on them. If you lie about what happened and they can then get away with it, they've not been successfully punished. In my world, that desire wouldn't overtake what the justice system looks like. In your world, it could be so, like, because
so
obviously
wait,
all these different systems.
you
Hang
want
on,
to
sorry.
change
Let me just
somebody else's
let me
desire.
let me complete. No, no. Let me complete
So
the
I don't
thought
understand
because,
what you are saying.
um, yes. Sorry. Let me complete the thought because when we're looking at all these systems that are in place, we're looking at, like, the law system, business, everything like that. It's obviously comprised of people. If people are just making these systems off on the whim of their own personal desires, it's not a trustworthy system. Like, God knows what things could end up looking like if it was just governed by people who so feel at that moment, that they are enforcing things that they feel would be good or they would like to see. What about people in power, like doing what they do? Like, oh, well, I'm doing what I personally desire at the moment. And especially when you give people power to do things, like, I could not trust that world. But yeah, what
Well,
was your
you
question?
live in that world.
Not necessarily. I think to a degree, like, given how some systems operate, the individual desire is governing, what people do, i.e., like, you could argue with like climate change, and there's the desire to make money. So these systems are in place in order to, make money for the shareholders, but not the stakeholders aren't actually
Not
considered.
just
So you
that.
could say that, but I think,
People
in
prosecute murderers because they want justice, because they want those persons to be punished for their immoral acts.
but
That is
I've just
everyday
gone
occurrence.
through like multiple times how
Yes,
that wouldn't
and
necessarily be the case
of
in your
course,
world. So I think we should
because
move on from like,
I don't demand perfection. You demand perfection, and you want to achieve it by
no, I
changing other
don't like,
people's wishes
no,
magically, and you cannot do that.
you are, you're complete. No, I'm sorry. I'm not demanding perfection because I understand that when we're talking about humans, you can't even get that. There are going to be children who murder. You can't then have the same outcomes and consequences for them. We're dealing with systems involving people. You will never have perfection. So I don't even know why we're
Yes, so
using that word.
I cannot
Again,
see.
there's been a couple of instances in this debate where you've used kind of charged language to make it sound like my system's worse than it is. Like, I don't know if that's the motivation. Obviously, like you said, you don't care about motivations, but I do. So if that's the kind of motivation to kind of make it sound like it's just so obscure to just think that every single person who follows a certain category has a certain consequence that's negative and deters people, I wouldn't say that's striving for perfection. I think that's a false claim.
Well, my system deters people, but you cannot ensure that there will be no murders. That is impossible. People will murder even though that exact instance, God smites them from the heavens and they die the millisecond after they kill somebody. People will still kill if they believe that that is in
I,
their best interest.
I know that people will still kill, but if you bring people into the world kind of with this worldview of like your desires and your wants, you know, these kind of like instinctual feelings that you go off are the most important thing, that is going to have an effect on how people navigate the world and
Well,
how
it's not
people
the most
act.
important
And
thing. I never said they are the most important thing, but
so
they are the
you said
fact of the
free.
world.
So you said free. Yeah, yeah, but you said the thing is though. So if we had this world where we were like, well, there's no kind of like oughts or anything like that. It is just a fact that freedom, you know, like you said, oh, well, I find freedom really important. So that would be something that you would implement. And then
Yes,
you'd
it
say,
is
well, it is just
my
the case
wish.
that we have these desires. And then there's no kind of follow up of like what we should do with that. That would affect how those people operate in that world. And that world would be incredibly dangerous. And I would say far more dangerous than a world that I'm looking to implement or that I would like to implement.
Well, I would definitely say that if you had magical powers, you could implement whatever you wanted, but you don't. You cannot
You're
change.
not, that's not an engagement with my statement.
Well,
Like
I cannot
this has
see
happened.
any.
I
I
I,
can
I
when I ask you
Conan.
to list specific things that you would
Oh yeah, we
put
can go
in.
through that. It's just
Yeah,
the
sure. Let's
reason. Can I
go.
just say one of the reasons I keep getting thrown off is because when I say something, you don't actually address it, and it is throwing me off quite a bit. Like, so can we just before we do that? So look, I'll write it down so that I don't forget because I'm like that. All right, got a smooth vegan brain here. Okay, so we'll go through
Point by point.
systems
Very good.
whereby I what say minimize what we're looking for, minimize killing, minimizing harm, or maximizing survival, things like that. What specifically were you asking me to outline?
Well, show me how you can implement systems with your prescriptive morality that are plausible, that are implementable in the real world without magic,
Yeah, yeah, that
and
do
I
what?
will
That do what?
and we will discuss system by system, point by point. I have a
Yeah,
lot of
Conan.
time.
That sorry. That do what? That do what?
That show that your system would be safer than mine.
Safer. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So safer.
For humans, of course.
So
I
just yeah,
care
for
little for
humans, yeah,
animals.
yeah. But we are going to need to get onto the animals after that. Okay,
Yeah,
so like we're
I
gonna,
have
you
plenty
know,
of time.
but I have about 2 hours, and then I do want to address my chat.
Of course.
So it's been about an hour. So let's just address what I was talking about previously. So can you remember what I just said? I hope you do. Otherwise, I'm going to have to look back because I
Uh,
don't want to like
when you just said, or how long ago?
yeah, like just before that, like because I said that you didn't address it, and I still believe that you didn't.
I cannot say what was that because a lot was said in a very short amount of time. Uh,
this is the thing, we're going to have to stick like on the topic, and things are going to have to be addressed one by
Yes.
one. Otherwise we're going to get really lost, and there's not really much point, is there? I
Yeah,
think what
I
I was
agree with that
saying,
notion.
yeah, I think what I was saying was something along the lines of, in that, you can't have this perfect for that. I don't think it's magic to assert that, I can have a world whereby, there are consequences for people's actions, and those consequences deter people from doing things, and they can be, taught, and we'll go through those things, how to not actually engage in behaviors that affect the survival rate of human beings. And in your worldview, like that, you say, okay, well, that desire, to always punish people, or that desire to maybe like stop someone from doing something, will likely be present, but we can't be sure of that. It's off a whim desire. I've given examples of times where someone's desire to do something else might pervert the course of justice. And I've outlined in that way how the world would be unsafer. And then, yeah, I don't think it was addressed.
Okay, so I would again ask you to, uh, because what I'm doing, I'm describing the real world. So when you say that course of justice can be averted, I would definitely agree with that. It can be averted. It is sometimes averted. Uh, but I would like to ask you, what would you do specifically to stop this? What
Yeah,
would
we'll
you
go.
tell to that
Yeah, we'll
person
go through that.
who doesn't want to tell on his friend? What
Yeah,
would
we'll
you?
go through that.
How
But
would you
you're not. I
convince
just want
them?
to. I just want to. Kind of. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Hang on. We'll do that. But I want to just push back on the fact that you said I'm describing the world. But if everyone thought like you did, this wouldn't be what the world looked like. This
Uh,
would not be like it may be someone's first thought to be self-entitled and do what they so desire, but I'm not comfortable conceding to the idea that this is how people actually behave, like in most cases.
but they do.
So it wouldn't be the world that you're describing. It would be another world. It would be, and I'm saying, a much unsafer world.
No, I would think that it is complete. It is exact description of this world.
So
People
you
in this
think
world sometimes, and in majority of times, seek to punish those who are immoral. They do this because it is their wish to do so, and sometimes in less times, uh, that is not their wish because their instinct for morality get overpowered by some other instinct or by some rational thought.
Right,
That is
I'll give
completely
an
possible.
no, I'll give an example. So, say for example, you collectively, there are people who so desire or are repulsed by, lesbians. Okay, and a lesbian gets, like, I get murdered by somebody, and in this kind of system that's been, set up by people, so going off their desires and their, their thoughts about whether or not things are, not even right or wrong. They just what their feelings are on it, and a lot of the time people feel disgust when they're dealing with someone who's homosexual. So it could be the desire of the jury to not have that person actually punished because the victim was a lesbian.
Again, a jury is a specific legal form of, and we are not talking here about laws as per se. We are talking about morality, and
We're
laws
talking
can
about punishment, and
yes, and
punishment is
punishment
like,
does not
yeah.
necessarily needs to come through legal system, right?
But okay, when we're
Punishment,
talking about this,
morality.
I was picturing, so how, but in that case, can we admit that if it were the desires of those individuals to not really care so much for that victim because there was a trait present within them that disgusted them, that it would cause them to, care less for that victim and feel as if it didn't really matter that they were killed, and then treat that individual who killed them differently?
Well, it is completely possible for such a thing to happen, but it would be relatively rare. From what I
But okay,
see,
so
and from
if
what
it's
I in,
yeah, if it's
see
rare though,
in my in
it's
my
still unsafe.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
it's still unsafer though. Yeah, if it happens, if in your system it does happen quite a few times, it's rare, but relative, to the entire systems in place, it still does happen. That's already outlining that it's unsafer if I can, go through,
yes, and
my system.
that is why let's go to your system to see
Yeah.
what would you implement and how would you ensure that uh, a greater percentage of
Mm-hmm.
immoral acts be punished than in systems that I'm describing.
Yeah, okay. So in my kind of system, and this is, where the oughts come in. So I would start very heavily and have huge emphasis on childhood. I think a lot of these kind of negative behaviors, negative thoughts about others, and the need to have a desire acted out, no matter how that affects others, is influenced by somebody's childhood and the trauma that they've experienced. We see this with a lot of different traumatic events that a victim of that trauma will reenact that trauma. And I think if, the children who are growing up are safer in safer environments, they're more tended to, they're more their inner child is actually looked after. I think that's one massive component in how we better ensure that people who grow up aren't just these traumatized people reenacting and projecting all of their trauma onto other people. I think that's a massive way to do it. I think
Okay,
another
okay.
way.
Is it, no, okay, let's stick to this before we get to
Yeah,
another
sure.
way. Okay, so let's stick to this. First, there is two sets of those who uh, act, let's say, out their desires. First are psychopaths, which are genetic, and you cannot really do much about it. And they are sociopaths. Okay, you want to
Yep, who are nurtured
decrease.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to decrease number of sociopaths.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how would you do it?
So when we're talking about sociopathy and narcissism, again, that's basically childhood trauma. You can't really, like, obviously
No, no.
psychopathy,
How
but
would you
that is
ensure
born.
the lower amount of childhood trauma, lower than it is now?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to go on to my second part. So when we're talking about like broken windows theory, if we were to actually aid areas of higher poverty, because we see higher domestic abuse, we see higher crime rates in those areas, we see higher child abuse cases. I think in when we see desperation, that's when we see like naturalistic behaviors acting out because people's needs aren't met. They are in a state of trying to survive. So they end up just, enacting behaviors that are negative to others because the self entitlement to, survive themselves and to self preserve is present. So, there are many different ways that you could go about actually ensuring that that is minimized, that children are tended to. Firstly, better education regarding, how we treat children. Like it is the case that people can just have kids without even knowing, like how to look after them. So I think if people are informed of the consequences of, them, emotionally neglecting them, what that even looks like, that would be a first thing. Because I think a lot of, parents, if they knew what the things that they did to their child would have that consequence to them, then they wouldn't have done it. And as well as that, yeah, if we had better support for areas of poverty where they could actually have that support there if they needed their child looking after, so they weren't neglected. I think as well we should look more into like extended families, including more people, more friend groups, more communal elements into like looking after a child, because in a modern world, just having two people looking after a kid while they're going to work and everything like that, even if one's just staying at home, that's the kid is probably going to get neglected more so than they would if they were looked after by multiple people. So there's loads of ways you could go down, ensuring that we see less examples of narcissists, of sociopaths, of people with trauma acting out their self-entitlement, and not considering others via their empathy. But that is a very like it's huge because the problem's so big. But just these kind of like basic things of like neglecting a child, not tending to them quickly enough when they're crying. That's seemed to have consequences on things like borderline personality disorder. That's something that's quite associated with that child and neglect and abandonment at an early age. So there's so many things. Like it's just a massive. I'm very passionate about it. I really am. I'd love to talk about it. Like to the I could knock your ear off about it. I really could, but I would like to get to the other animals. But I hope I've outlined some examples. And it maybe my belief is just weird that if we dealt with childhood trauma insofar as we ensured that it didn't happen as much as we possibly could, that if it did happen, because trauma is going to happen at many cases, that it was tended to, making therapy something that's more accessible for people, so even people who don't have mental conditions can have these conversations and have their their existence feelings validated.
Majority of what you said, I realize those are very good advices, but I don't see how that contradicts anything that I said. But if you want to say, if you want to go to animals, we can go to animals, or we can speak on this. But I don't see how any of what you said contradicts with anything that I said.
So I'll outline. Okay, so if we're talking about the real world, I don't think that there is really. So if we have loads of traumatized people, I think it's a vicious cycle. I think that if you have all these traumatized people and they have that self-entitlement present, like I'll give an example of someone who was pretty horrible to me, and they were just a really traumatized person, and I think that they'll continually keep traumatizing people while they're traumatized, and that they won't actually tend to it, because in their self-interest of the traumatized person that they are, they will just carry out doing what they so desire to do. And I think in this kind of world where we're just kind of going off our just desires of that moment, we're not rationally navigating how we should go about.
I think that you just said the same as I. That person was a person who still do what they want. You just want to prevent them to have those wants.
What's that? Sorry?
The person would still do what they want, but you want to prevent them from having certain wants.
What I want to do is ensure that they're not traumatized individuals, because that would change.
Wants not to occur to them. That is what you want, and
absolutely. So I want a world
and that
where
has nothing. That does not contradict my thing that people will act as they want. You simply want to change their wants, and
so in your world there wouldn't be this kind of change, there wouldn't be this kind of incentive to address these traumas, because if that's not the desire of those collectives at that time to implement these systems that prioritize these
about
issues.
Desires of collectives or of desires of other people.
But again, when we're talking about how this would look, if Conan, hang on. If we're talking about like what the world would look like if people thought the way that you did, then it would be the case that these collectives do engage in that way because they all think the way you do. Or majority think the way you do.
Well, if majority would think the way I do, they would have a better understanding of the world, and that would be it. Nothing else would change. They would they'd
have a better understanding of what the world might be now. But like, what do we do about that then? You've got it's like your worldview is, here's a potential problem here, and there's no follow-up.
I personally am not interested in prescriptive claims because I think they are just expression of your wishes. I don't think that they have value to other people other than yourself. But if you wish to stop if you want to prevent creation of sociopaths, you are free to do.
Or child trauma,
Or child trauma, you are absolutely free to do however you want.
I don't understand, because you said that you're looking at what the world is like, and it's like you're seeing people's desires, but then you're talking about how you're not interested in those desires and what those outcomes are. So I don't even know really what you're interested in.
I'm not interested in it as because prescriptiveness is advice, and it is expression of wishes. And those wishes, you can act on those wishes, but they have no bearing on me or anybody else. I may not wish to do anything that you wish to do. It does not mean that it is necessary that I don't, but I have the option of not wanting to do what you want to do. And you cannot force me to want what you want me to want. That is
Conan, I have no idea what you're going on about. I'm not forcing people to, I'm not going like, you need to think this way in this system. I'm talking about my belief is that when individuals aren't traumatized, that they engage in behaviors that aren't purely like self-entitlement, and that their desires consider individuals more. That's like when we see individuals who are deeply traumatized, is often the case that they will engage in traumatizing behavior to other people. So like I just don't I don't really know where to proceed from here, because I'm just, to be honest with you, I'm just confused about like what if you're not caring about oughts, then we can't really have a conversation about what the world should look like. You're just saying what it is, but if everyone thought the way that you did as well, then that wouldn't be what the world would look like. And I've outlined couple of times why I think it would be an unsafer place. You've said that, you know, if someone were to kill you, you know, they could, and that there would likely be some sort of repercussion or punishment for that, but like you can't be very sure of that.
Well,
and we went through how, like, if I was killing a dog in front of you, like mutilating them, that you'd have no desire to like do anything about it or stop it, or, you know, have that a world where that stops it because you don't see a benefit to it. I don't know really what to do other than
where did I said anything of those? I said I cannot call you immoral. That is what I said. And I also said,
you know what?
And
like,
I also said,
I will, because obviously I've recorded this. I will juxtapose them, and you know, I think you did, and I got you to repeat a couple of times because I was blown away. So I think that was what was said.
What was said, and you can surely see, and everybody who will watch this video after it is released from live stream will be able to see this. As I said, that you torturing a dog before me would cause me undesirable emotions.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying whether or not.
But I could not call you an immoral person or that did immoral.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that again. Right. So this is the problem we had last time. I told you I'm not saying about whether or not the person's immoral. If I were immoral for doing that, I was talking about, you know, no. So yeah, I'm talking about, you know, whether or not you'd want to see a world that reduces that, you know, minimizes that as much as possible. And you said, I don't really care because I don't see a benefit from it. That is what you said.
I don't see the benefit of expressing my wishes. My wishes are irrelevant to anybody other than me.
Well, I really don't know how to proceed from here, because let's just go through it again, because, you know, it seems that you think that I've perhaps taken you out of context, right? Irrelevant of your wishes, okay, and everything like that. How do you ensure that the world around you, right? Because obviously it's important what we think, because we can spread these views to others, that it is important. You know, we are having these discussions. People are being influenced by what we're saying one way or the other, right? So, you know, when we're talking about these things and we're talking about a worldview that we are interested in other people implementing, you know, we want to see people agreeing with us. And I'm in your worldview, you're watching me killing a dog, mutilating them slowly, painfully. And, you know, how do you wish to see, or how do you ensure that system, it ensures that happens as less as it possibly can, or that there's these consequences, you know, anytime somebody does that, so that we can, ensure that it happens as little as possible.
Okay. Again, I would say my wishes do not matter. You need to understand, when I approach morality, I approach it as a thing to be studied, not a thing to be changed. I'm studying it as it is now, and as I believe that it was for a very long time.
So what you're saying, Conan, is that you can't actually answer the question. Like, you can't answer it given your worldview. You can't answer, you know, how one would go about seeing that like reduced, or even if we should have some sort of imperative to do so.
Yes, I cannot answer it because I have no interest in answering it.
Then,
It is not something that
Conan,
is interesting to me.
how why are you? I don't understand why you're even here then, because you know that what we're going to be talking about is, whether or not it's moral to, like, stab a dog, and ought we do so, ought we,
Because
encourage
because
others not to do so. Like, I don't, it's like you're talking in Spanish and I'm talking in English. It's
very
like,
very easily, because I can point that something, again, people will have objections with using the word objectively, but that morality is a thing, and that it does not takes animals as valuable. Animals, other than as property, are not part of it. If you can
so
point out that they
wait.
are, I will be very interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's multiple ways in which, so valuable in other ways, you mean?
No, valuable
Speak.
and is immorally valuable. That I have a moral that I have uh, that they are morally valuable, by which means that they are a part of a moral system, other
Okay,
than
so
as
do you,
property,
so
of
firstly,
course.
let's just clarify. You believe humans are, yeah?
Yes,
So what is it about those humans and those other animals that's different in the sense that it would then make it something that wouldn't apply to them?
simply again, name the trait won't really apply here because it is, but again, because we
No, 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 no.
evolved
Conan,
this specific
Conan.
way of morality. If you only way that you can point out
But
that
hang on, Conan. We the thing is though, like, not all humans have this morality. You say, well, we've evolved to have it. There are humans who don't have that, who can understand that. So it's not, I don't understand. So that isn't a difference that is present in those humans but not the other animals, because sometimes those humans don't have that, and we don't then treat them differently.
yes, of course, some 10% of the population does not have a moral instinct, but that does not mean
It's not even
that.
that. It's as well, like with cognitive conditions that mean that they can't, conceptualize, these systems to
But
begin
it
with.
is
So it's like
irrelevant.
but it's not
No,
though,
no.
because
Let me
hang on,
explain why it is irrelevant.
I just want to say, just before you do that, you may say it's irrelevant, but we don't treat those humans differently on
Yes, we
that
don't. That
basis.
is the point. We don't.
Yeah.
Because we don't. Because we evolved not to treat them differently.
Well, we
Be-
no, though we do, like, that you could, like, it's quite difficult having these discussions about evolution, but we do treat individuals differently, according, if they're not in our internal group, like, and that we could put that to, like, any, different, they could have like different colored eyes, and we would look at them and think, oh, they're not part of our group, or they would speak a different language, oh, they're not part of our group, they're dangerous. Like, we see difference,
of
and
course, you would
we
perceive them
we
as
a lot of the time we fear it. So I don't know if we can go down that route.
fear is not uh, opposite to morality. Uh,
But
morality simply.
but we're
Uh,
talking about, so you could make this argument, right? So when you fear something, it is instinctually the case that it will likely be a danger to you. So it would be like a bad thing that we're observing. So, and when we're talking about, again, I don't know, when because you've outlined that you don't like using words bad, good, the moral and immoral, and
well, I
these
use
things are
moral and
quite
moral,
difficult to
but
navigate. Yeah, you use them, but so I don't. The difference is we use language so differently, and you don't use oughts, whereby I do, to the point where I'm not really understanding, like, what the outcomes are, what you would, everybody who would assign to this system would even, like, wish to do in a given moment. I couldn't
well,
trust that. I don't believe it would be safe. Like, so
nobody
I don't
can
know
look.
whether.
Nobody can assign to this system. They can either recognize that it exists, or they can point to something which I described wrongly. Those are their two options. There is no third option. They can even either say, yes, Colin, you described morality correctly, or they can say, no, Colin, you did not describe morality accurately. Those are two options that anybody has. Uh,
I'm not sure, but if we go through, because obviously I said that it is the case that there are humans who don't, have this the ability to, conceptualize morality or, act that out in that way. So obviously, I'm still looking for the difference. You said you were going to explain how
yeah,
it doesn't
I will
apply.
explain it. Uh, uh, Again, we treat those humans as part of moral system. We do. Why we do? I
But
can
we don't
speculate.
necessarily. Again, though, some
Okay,
humans,
let me finish. Uh, I would like to point out that if somebody who is mentally um impaired does something harmful to you, that they would be punished. They wouldn't be allowed to continue to do something harmful to you. In most occasions, of course, if you are alone in the woods and nobody sees you and he kills you and nobody ever finds your body and there is no evidence. But in ordinary, normal circumstances, that person would not be allowed to continue to harm you, right?
but in your worldview, if it was only if it was such the desire of the collective that governed that
Yes,
punishment
but
to do
what I'm
so,
saying is
yeah,
that
it wouldn't necessarily always be
that
it.
is the desire, because morality functions because it is enforced, and there is that desire. It cannot maybe manifest at every single person at that exact moment, but as a collectively, that desire exists to such a degree that moral system is enforced.
Yeah, but we've seen loads of different moral systems enforced. We see places where they're still, throwing gay people off
Again,
buildings. Like, then that's the collective desire. And so, in your kind of view, like that's the collective desire. So, we just
again,
allow that to continue to
I
be
would go
acted
back
out
to my Nazi example. You can brainwash people or convince people to follow
to not throw
basically
people off
anything,
buildings.
or no, to throw people. I believe that people's natural stance is not to throw people off the buildings, but you can convince them to throw people off the buildings. We are not purely morally instinctive creatures.
But the thing is,
There
though,
is
like
also a
if we
cultural
were
aspect.
Yeah, but
But
the thing is
that
though,
is
it is the
why
case we
I
can't critique. Hang on though, if we've but we you can't really critique any system that has existed where the collective believed what they did at the time or currently believe what they do at the time, because those are the desires that are being acted out by that collective. They collectively want to throw gay people off buildings. They or the collectively, they would behead people for, or like, even the witch example, like
of course we
collectively they
won't.
wanted to
Of course we
burn the witch.
can.
How?
Because they did not act in accordance with that evolutionary morality. They acted
But
immorally.
You could criticize like a lesbian like myself in that kind of evolutionary trait. I would
No,
be
I
a
cannot.
disadvantage. You could though. Like it's a
How?
though it is a natural occurrence for homosexuality. I'm not going to reproduce. I'm not engaging in one of those natural behaviors that I'm driven to do.
But there
Like
is
that.
no, again, it is your role. You are proposing that there is ought from is. I don't, and people don't. You don't have obligation to procreate. You don't. And I cannot say that that is immoral, because you are not harming anybody. Only when you harm other humans, you harm moral instinct. Only in that
Yeah. So we
case.
need to. This is the thing. We need to go through this because again, like I've still not clear on the whole the difference between other animals and humans, because you said about that moral system that humans have, but we still have this issue where there are humans who do not have that moral system present, and we don't devalue them based upon that. Of
Because
course
they are the part of the
we will
system.
restrict them when they engage in a behavior that doesn't accept that, but it can be the case there are people with psychopathy who don't engage in those behaviors, but it doesn't
Yes,
suddenly mean that we go, okay,
because
well, like a pig, like a cow, like a chicken, now we can exploit and kill you if we have a certain preference for your flesh, either to eat it or to wear it. So I don't know how you're getting there.
very very easily. Because for first, I don't see how, by which means and by which evolutionary drive animals would be included. That is the first thing. Second thing is to go back on those who are unable to participate in the moral system. They are forced to participate in the moral system because that is what society, when I say society, I don't mean any particular society, but humanity as a whole, enforces. Even if you are born without the moral instinct, morality is such an easy and obvious concept to adhere to that you have ability to through use of reason and rationality to adhere to it because it is very, very easy to do so.
Can you say that first thing you said before, the evolutionary thing?
Okay, I don't see any drive, any because
for them to be included.
For them to be included, yes. I don't see any evolutionary benefit to including them because animals are either prey or predator. You don't have protection from predators, and you kill prey.
Well, so no, the thing is, so like evolutionarily speaking, it would be an evolutionary, like, so when we're talking about like naturally occurring diseases, evolutionarily, they would actually be quite beneficial because they would ensure that the weakest die, that the say a given group, they're not bogged down by that weak one and they're just killed off, right? However, we can look at this kind of natural occurrence and be like, well, even if this is an evolutionary advantage, even though this is a natural occurrence, this would be of benefit, obviously, to implement these medicines so that people don't die and things like that.
I think you went on a bit on when I say organisms, even though there are random mutations by which new traits occur, they stick because there is some incentive from the environment in which that trait is beneficial to first that organism, and through procreation it is still to other organisms which are offsprings of the first, right? And there is I don't know
what that has to do with my point whatsoever.
Well, I don't believe how your point is, well, I don't want to sound rude, but it has nothing to do with what I'm describing or with evolution. That is not how evolution really works.
Can you clarify again? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Again, I don't see what environmental influences on would encourage, even if such a random mutation occurs in which that animals would somehow trigger moral instinct in humans, how would that be beneficial first to that single organism in which that mutation occurs, and then to its offsprings? Because animals the thing is prey or predator. You don't have protection of morality from predators.
So do you think everything has to have some sort of like survival benefit to the individual or their offspring? Is that what you're...
Well, other than specific like sexually sexual selectivity, yes, that is how evolution.
Do you believe all empathy that someone extends is related to that, is due to that, like due to the survival of an individual?
Well,
or
empathy
their
is a feeling. It allows you to extrapolate the feeling of another. That is evolutionary, very beneficial, right?
Yeah,
because in evolutionary psychology there are three usually cited purposes for development of empathy. I personally believe that there may be a few more, but those are that as a human, as a mammal, you need to be attentive to the needs of your young. As a social being, you need to be attentive to the needs of your group, because with better group mates, you have with stronger group mates, healthier group mates, happier group mates, you have higher chance of survival. And third, it warns you of danger. If you see monkey being sick from eating a certain berry or something, you will see that that berry presents a danger, so, and you will avoid it.
Okay, so yeah, so we're talking about these, but when we kind of like exact that onto like modern life, like say I break up with a woman, there was no ability for us to reproduce, there was nothing there, there's my survival's not been affected, and someone feels empathy for me because they see how upset I am. Like, do you think that empathy is misguided?
Well, uh, uh, there is misguided is some thing that I used to use, but I would say if that person uses empathy, it would actually, in your particular case which you listed, that would be a very appropriate use of empathy, because you are their group mates and they want to make you need to understand how you feel to make you feel better, to be a more productive group mate, right?
Okay,
But
so
that is
yeah, so when we were talking about
you can find an example of misplaced empathy. I don't believe that your example was such an example, but uh, brains can be tricked. Brains can be tricked in getting stimulated by the things they are not meant to be stimulated by. But to be fair, that is part of what I believe that happens to vegans. I believe that vegans have higher than average empathy towards animals, and I don't think that that is very beneficial to them.
The thing is, you don't need empathy for an individual to value them and respect their autonomy.
No,
so
well, you can use a lot of I don't want to don't take this but mind washing, don't take this as a negative point, but persuasive tactics to change somebody's opinion, to take them this way or that way.
Let's just boil it down, right? Okay, so the thing is, like, and I still haven't, it's still not clear to me what the difference is, because like, even when these you say, oh well, they're forced into the system and everything because by merit of being human, even if they are, they don't have this kind of morality set up, we don't devalue them, and that so insofar as they're underneath this threshold whereby it's justified to exploit and kill them for a taste preference. So it's not, and that's the thing, that's like, you can say it's like mind washing or whatever, but I cannot see what's so fundamentally intrinsically different about these animals that would mean that it would be justified to exploit and kill them. Like, I don't. So why would I then pay for people to do that to them? And when we're talking about like, how it would benefit individuals, you were talking about how, you have these negative feelings. You say that it doesn't affect you so much anymore, but that you would have a negative feeling watching me bludgeon a dog to death, like mutilate them and kill them. Like I even in this kind of view that you have, I would think, okay, well, even if I thought that way, that would be beneficial to me to live in a world where I could eat those things that I get taste pleasure from. I could have those positive experiences while not feeling those negative feelings of seeing individuals being like exploited and killed.
You live in that world, right? You have the
I,
option.
I don't, though, because it still happens. Like, I can say, oh, I don't contribute to that. However, I have to live with the fact that, these billions, trillions of animals are being killed. Like that's not good.
Yes.
Like so I don't live in that world.
The world will not bend to your wishes, right?
I know, but again, like,
or your preferences.
You're not addressing what I said.
You would probably also desire that every woman be a lesbian, so you have a wider pool of dating. But they're not, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. Like, I desire individuals not to violate the rights of individuals. So, like, technically, I'd be violating the right of an individual if I enforced lesbianism upon them.
I didn't say that you would enforce, but you simply want them to be. But
Yeah,
you are
earlier when I
again.
was talking about what I want to do, you were saying that I was like, there was mind washing from it. So it's like, well, I'd have to then mind wash them, wouldn't I, if that
Ellie,
were my
again,
wants?
you want you want to world to be as you want it to be, but it is not, and you need to accept that it is
Why are you
not.
telling me things that I know, Conan? Oh my God. No,
because
wait. Are you
because
telling me the
you are
world is not how I want it? Conan, you've blown my mind. You've sent me. Of course I know that. That's the frustration.
yes,
It's the
and you need to live
frustration
with
that
that frustration. You are not a child.
I know I'm not a child. I don't know why you've said that.
But because it is a childhood behavior. It is what you
Oh,
are
the
doing is
I want. Yeah, but the
yes,
difference is, so when I'm talking about my wants, it's not just for like what personally I'd want to benefit me, because what the world would look
but
like if
you
it
no no no.
hang on, you've made a claim, you've called me like a child, so I'm gonna outline that. What I would want in my first, instinct is very different from how I actually want the world to be. Like, to have everything I want. That's not how the worldview that I actually want to see. And this is what I was talking about beforehand with the first kind of thought and then the second one. The first one is the childlike one, more so than the second one. So I don't know. I don't appreciate the patrony there. I don't think that was really necessary. Like,
Well, I think it was a good job, but again,
how was it? Sorry.
there is nothing in place which prevents me from killing animals. Nothing will happen to me if I kill animals. There is no
What,
reason for anything to happen to me because I kill animals. And
those are two different things. Obviously, it is the case currently that there aren't repercussions for some animals. There are, if you killed a dog,
they are
if I did
legal.
that to a dog.
They are legal, but morally they are none. If you can point
Oh,
that they
morally,
are,
I mean,
but
you just want to go to the Facebook page of a trophy hunter, like, and the even the non-vegans in there are like they are wanting justice of the
well,
most brutal and highest order.
I can
So,
explain that if you want.
no, I think I'm aware. But is there anywhere else that you would like to go with this? We've got about 15 minutes, and then we've hit like the 2 hour mark.
I can go whenever you want to take me. Again, I would. I will, if
Yeah,
I can if I
I'll
can
let
have 50
you.
minutes, I will probably like to say that why people are disgusted with that hunter, and
Oh no,
I
yeah,
would
I
point
think
it out to basically brainwashing because in Western culture, from the moment you are born, you are taught that animals are cute, that the animal is innocent. There is ample fornication of animals on every corner, from cartoons, plushy animals. Uh, um, Kids are taught that animals are good, not to harm them, because most of the animals that kids meat are pets. And there is a very good reason not to harm somebody's pet because they will be very upset and they will take actions. And of course, the pet can harm a child if the child goes too far. So it is very beneficial for the survival of the child for a parent to teach them to respect animals, which they majority of those in Western world meet on regular occasion or on regular occasions, that being dogs, cats, and similar. But that is why there is this, and you will see that this disgust of hunting and this disgust of things connected to exploitation of animals as a resource can be correlated with increase in upper formation of animals in culture, particularly in the West.
It vaguely explains it, but obviously it's the case that like people find chicks and other baby animals like calves and piglets cute, and they still engage in this behavior. So
Yes,
yeah, it is
because
Like
there
we
is
are
Peppa
we're
Pig, and there is it expanded to such extent that basically it is brainwashing people en masse, and that is what cultures do. They brainwash people. Uh,
But so
I
yeah, but in your view, you just would want people to know what is like, oh, that people act on their desires, and then there's no follow up of like what we then do with that, other than just do it.
well, uh, that do it is what I
If you
want.
want to do it, if you
I
want to.
want to provide people with true information. That is my wish. I have no other wish other than that. In this department of, I only want to describe morality correctly, and I want if to spread my knowledge that I acquired. That is all I want on how morality is, how morality works, and that is all.
So that's
And
the thing.
it
Like
and
when we
morality,
then
in my
that could
view,
just
does
lead
not
to yeah,
include
like
animals.
whatever. Yeah, I don't really know like what I'm supposed to do with that information, because obviously it leads to these outcomes whereby we see horrific things happening, and we can't guarantee that there will be that system that does indeed like punish people, but also deters people from doing so, that
Because
encourages or discourages that desire to be present in the first place, by those things that I've outlined. Because if it's the case, we live in a world where an individual is valued for who they are, regardless of what they can do for us, that world would be a less violent world. Like imagine if everybody, like, or the majority, genuinely believed, oh, that is an individual, their autonomy is valuable in and of themselves, they don't need to do anything for me, and I should respect that. Like if that was a genuine belief that people hold, then I think that the world would be a much safer one, and would see that in not just with animal rights, but with how humans treat other humans.
again, when I'm describing something, I'm describing something that exists in the world, and that is is. From is, you cannot get to ought. It is impossible.
That's I don't know what that has to do. I'm just completely like I don't know where to proceed. I don't know if, because it's so incompatible to the point that we can't even have these conversations. I can't
Of course,
have
we can
like
have conversation. We are conversing for over 2 hours.
exactly. We've conversed for 2 hours, and I think it's like quite exhausted. I don't like you know what I mean, because I just
I'm
can't
rather
picture.
fresh.
I'm pardon.
I am rather fresh, and I
I
have
know
a lot
you
more
are, but
energy.
obviously I have to limit these because I've got other work to do,
Yeah,
and I've
yeah,
got to
of
address my
course.
chat and everything like that. And loads of people like already want to debate me, and I've already seen people in the chat, they want to as well. It's like, oh my god, it was my mistake because I put the ultimate debates compilation up, and I'd just recently talked about how like debates was sucking the life out of me and bad for my mental health, and I wanted to stop them and stuff like that. But now I'm having to do more.
Well,
But
I think the debates are very morally stimulating, and I
they're good,
believe
but
that.
like I don't know if you're aware of how much I like. Obviously, we probably do them a similar amount. I have like on average like one every day. I have sometimes like 10. Like it's ridiculous. It's not sustainable.
Well, to be fair,
But
most of the debaters you encounter are, I would say, uh,
not versed like myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
not very good or very nuanced to stimulate you.
Well, no, I think every single time, even if they don't, I think it's interesting because it's like how people like will post hoc justify things and stuff like that. That's very interesting to me to watch in real time, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm not sure what to do with it, because like the questions I've asked you, where you were like, oh well, regarding the world, and you wouldn't care or do anything about it unless it was your desire at the time. I think
Well,
it does outline.
nobody would act if there is no desire to act. Even you would not act if
Yes,
it is
but
not your
I've
desire
already
to act.
outlined though, like, so for example, like, say I really don't want to help my friend because I'm really tired, but I do. It's
But
because
no,
I
no.
desire,
If
it's
you
because I,
do,
hang on, it's because I've desired, it's still because I've desired to do so. That's why I'll end up doing it.
yes,
Arguably, everything that you're doing, you desire to do.
yes,
But the way in which we're taught, the way in which we're socialized, the trauma that we experience will dictate to a large degree what we want.
yes, of
And
course.
I think in a world where we just talk about, oh, we just so desire, we have these desires, and there's no kind of like navigation of oughts, right? That is when I'm like, okay, well, the desires that people have, I think, could be really dangerous and could be ones, and I've outlined a couple of times how they could be, you know, a threat to others' survival, a threat to other existence and experience, and that's why it concerns me.
Again, every ought is expression of desire.
Yes, but again, when even if that is the case, we can outline those oughts and where those conclusions would lead and what outcome they would
Of
have,
course, you can.
and
You can
and
argue
that
for your
outcome and
view
that
however you want.
outcome will so be desired, obviously, you know, because that's the action that people take. But as we've talked about, you've talked about the Nazis, they had a desire for different outcomes, and you know the way in which, if they were socialized differently, if that trauma wasn't so present in like Adolf Hitler, and he didn't, you know, have that experience growing up, it may have not been the case that he so desired to have these people killed. Like that's what I'm saying. So obviously there is this kind of like push to enforce a different way that those desires are expressed, but in a way that is what's the word, like considerable of their well-being, because if someone isn't traumatized or their trauma is addressed, then that well-being that they can experience is better in the first place. So even though it's been enforced to, you know, have that validated and then validate other people and be sensitive to them and their experience, though that's forced upon them, you know, we were talking about, you know, propaganda, that would lead to a better world. So at this point, I'm just
Well, it
repeating
would lead
myself.
to a
So
world that is more in line with your desire. It will probably live in the world which is more in line with my desire. But again, I, as a person who is studying morality, like, I don't want to use the word scientific because I'm not somebody who is able to scientifically study psychology and genetics. I'm economist, but somebody who is doing this arbitrarily and who's dedicated a fair amount of time to it, I cannot. I can only do it descriptively. And from descriptively to prescriptively is a huge gap that you cannot jump through.
I mean, I'd really recommend. Have you ever spoken to perspective
I
philosophy?
tried to actually debate persuasive philosophy. He says his schedule is too busy, but I will
Yeah,
try
like
again.
it's yeah. I will because obviously when we're talking about this, you know, we're getting into like meta ethics and stuff like that. It goes further down this route, like to the point where it's not really even been, you know, about the animals. And I'm still confused about some things, but obviously I think you've explained it, but the way in which you're explaining it is not compatible with my understanding. And like I think that I've garnered, you know, what I thought would be the case if people also thought like this, which would be more risky, dangerous situations that would lead to more harm, less survival, and wouldn't, you know, it also include, you know, other animals who are having this experience that we're having similarly. And all those things that I personally value about existence, you know, the experience, love, you know, feeling as much well-being as possible, trying to avoid, you know, that suffering, and valuing the autonomy of an individual. Those things are still present for most animals as well. They're still having that experience. It can look very different, but you know, I'd want to honor that. And though that is my desire also, and my worldview, if I were to act it out, it's not just consideration of my own desires, it's in consideration of others,
No,
to the
it
basic.
is simply in your desire that you wish to uh, that you wish quote unquote good for others. That is also your
well
desire,
well, yeah,
but
no, but then isn't it the desire of a pig to survive?
I believe that it is.
So then my desires are being compatible with the desires of those pigs, or the
Yeah,
desires of
but
those individuals
it
to
is
not
your
be exploited
desire
and
that you
killed.
want the pig to survive. Just because it correlates with the pig's desire is a different point, but it is still your
Well, no,
desire.
no. What I'm saying, I'm not saying my survival
No, no,
desire
no. It is
is
your
present. I'm talking
desire. It
about
is your desire
to
for that
ensure
pig's
that they,
desire
yeah,
to
yeah,
be fulfilled. But that is still
yeah.
your desire, right?
Yeah, but it's also theirs as well. So what I'm
Yes,
talking about
it
is
is.
if we can have a system whereby individuals' desires are compatible with those of others, and that these very the bare roots of this thing, like someone's life, their autonomy, their existence, those are respected. That is a better world that I would see in front of me, in my view.
But again, when you say better world, that just means world more in line with your desires.
But the thing is, though, like this is what's like throwing me off, because I think my desires are very, and the world that I would outline is quite clear, but yours is very unclear because it's just on your kind of like desires that like one moment from the next. It's like your world wouldn't look
No,
very
no.
linear and
My
clear to me.
desires are, well, I
Freedom
in
and
this whole,
yeah.
yeah, all that I said, all desires that I explained in this whole 2 hour conversation is that I value freedom, and that my own freedom first of utmost, and the second one is that given that ability to control the universe, I would be a very selfish god. That is all the two things that I said, that the only in this whole 2 hour conversation that are my desires. Everything else was simply descriptive statements about the real world as explained to the best of my ability,
Yeah,
and that is all.
I don't think you've explained the real world. I think that you're, because we talked about this already, like, and we're just going to keep repeating ourselves, so it's probably
Well,
best that this is like wrapping up. No,
what I would
no,
propose
no,
to
hang on,
you.
Conan, no, no, let me just, because otherwise I'll forget. um so fuck's sake, I've forgotten. Oh my god,
I
can you just repeat
apologize.
that again? No, that's fine, just repeat for me.
Uh, I said the last thing I said was that uh, everything else other than those two things, I
Oh
did
yeah, no, sorry.
trying to.
Yeah, I remember now. It's come back to me. I think that you falsely, you say you see the world for what it is as much as possible, but I don't think that the world is just this clear sense of people acting out just like, although like everything is a desire, right? So we're aware of that. Like everyone is acting out on their desires, but what the desires are and how that's engaged are those things that are important. And in your world you just kind of say, oh well, we desire, okay, we desire, okay, good, but then there's no follow-up, unless I missed that bit. But for me there is a follow-up, and it's like, well, we all have desires, and some of those desires are going to be have like negative outcomes for other individuals and some won't, and we should be considerate of that, because we're not the only ones experiencing in this world and interested in having those good feelings enacted or those bad feelings avoided. So what you so desire is very important to those around you, and that's why, like, you are, I would argue, I would agree with you that I think everything fundamentally is a desire. You're not so much forced into things, even if you think you might be. I think you still do it because you desire it. But at the same time, I think what people desire is really important. And that's how, when we socialize individuals, when we come away from desperation, and we change societally, those civilizations develop, I think we will see an improvement upon what people desire. Because I do believe that there are those prescriptions that people should be considering others when they are having those desires acted out. I may desire to be a millionaire, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go steal from everybody down the road.
Well,
Like,
well, not just that. Uh, I personally desire a yacht. I currently don't have enough financial funds to acquire one, so my wish is built upon the world, right? Same as if everybody else's wishes, which they cannot go through, are built upon the world. They are non sequitur. They are not in the calculations of anybody other than those who have it. Ellie, what I would propose.
Sorry.
Sorry, I that is not a very common name here in Croatia.
That's fine.
I would propose to you to watch this debate a few more times, and if you think
I
of
have
a
to anyway.
if you think of a
it.
different argument in which you can show that my description of the world is incorrect, or you have anything else to add, that you should contact me. You have my email. I am very open to discussing with you again anytime.
Yeah, no, that would be lovely. I think the issue is because obviously we are coming from very, very different perspectives to the point where obviously it is the case that I have to try and get into other people's shoes and understand their worldview and where they're coming from. But if someone's just saying, look, there's no prescriptions, there's nothing, like, then I'm just looking at the desires. It's like, what the fuck? Like, so it's like I would probably be interested, upon seeing more literature of the outcomes that would actually, play out, and I can look at. There were some times, and I might be completely wrong here, but because I've had an experience of like loads of people debating me and then me having to look afterwards, when I have claimed that I think that you haven't addressed some of my comments and stuff like that, I think there were some genuine times where they weren't. So maybe we could look back at those, and if I'm actually correct, we can have those addressed if they weren't. That would be really interesting. Yeah, but at this moment we are kind of at some sort of impasse where there's the need for you to repeat, then there's the need for me to repeat. So if anything, it probably does need to be a pause rather than an ending.
Yes, I would definitely agree that giving more time to digest the presented arguments would probably benefit both of us more in the long run than just spinning in circles again and again. So
because otherwise, like, it's all well and good. We could do this for like 5 hours if I really had all the time and like to do so. But it's like it's not good use.
I don't want to take any of your time, and I don't. I'm
a busy lady, believe it or not.
I appreciate that. I'm quite busy, but not today. I cleared my schedule, but ordinary. But I would certainly love to discuss this with you further, and I would urge not just you but everybody else to more think about to step back from individualism and from me and myself and look at a bigger picture more impartially, more I don't want to use the word scientifically, but more without so much emotional investment in positions as we hold.
I would say that I feel like that's literally like what you're doing, because obviously the desires, like, we are emotionally seeking these things, like a desire to have a partner is the emotional want typically to be validated and have attention and these things. And I would argue the inverse, that my view is actually considering more than just the self and like emotions, and being like, okay, well, there are other people other than me and what I want.
Of course.
And then there are there are like animals as well, and they also have these wants. So like, I need to consider them. So this is what we need to work out, who's got it the wrong way around.
Yes, and we also need to understand what led us to think what we think, and
I definitely know what led me to think the way I think, because obviously when we were talking about childhood and stuff like that, I think I think I can lay out quite
Yeah,
well, I
yeah, but
think, why
not
people
just
think the
you,
way they
but
do. But
other people as well.
well,
Uh,
that's
uh,
the thing. Like things when we look at like trauma or like childhood upbringing, things like that. Though humans are very complicated, a lot of the time they will follow patterns of behavior
yes, that
upon
is
those
exactly
things that
what
have
I'm
happened.
proposing. That patterns
Yeah,
of behavior do exist. Okay,
yeah.
so if that is all, I would conclude. I would like to conclude this tonight discussion. I think we are exactly at 2 hours mark. So I believe that if nobody will watch if we go on, people will lose interest. So thank you for allowing me to talk to you, for being very cordial. And I'm looking forward to your next email asking me to talk again.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we are kind of talking in circles, and hopefully, like, there can be a greater understanding, and we can try and come to some sort of, because obviously it's better to be able to dig holes in things and come to a conclusion if there's a greater understanding of it. So, yeah, thank you very much. And I'll try and get around to it at some point and see, because I'll be curious to, obviously, if I approach a problem, it's like, well, how can I go even further? That would be brilliant to know. So, but yeah, I
Yes.
appreciate you coming on, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your night.
Good night to everybody.
Thank you, Coden. Right, I'll exit the thingy.